We're going to let her rip today with ritual.
Okay.
It's a holiday. It's Christmas. I've never had a show that lands on Christmas, and I'm kind of excited about that because that's fun and it's the first time. And we're going to go to the ancient past this program. We're having the return of Ellen Hopman. She wrote a book last year. It came out. It's called The Sacred Herbs of Yule and Christmas: Remedies, Recipes, Magic, and Brews for the winter season. And we touched on it just briefly last year. And it is a fascinating book. It's very well researched. And if you don't know who Ellen is, she is a master herbalist. She's also a homeopath. She's been a Druid initiate since 1984. She's the founding member of the Order of the White Oak, Archdruidess, and founder of the Tribe of the Oak, a former professor of Grey School of Wizardry. And the thing that's important about talking with someone like Ellen is we're into this commercial scene. Get your tree, get the lights, have your friends over, and we're forgetting the fundamentals of the energy behind the winter solstice, which is Christmas. And we want to talk about this. We want to bring this energy back, and we're going to talk about the rituals that our ancestors practice around this time of year. And it has to do with the unseen world, and it has to do with the energy of seasonal changes and what that means to us as physical beings. So, Ellen, welcome to Destiny. Good to see you again, and happy solstice.
Yeah, happy Yule and Kwanzaa and Hanukkah and everything that's going on.
There's a lot of holidays to mention during the this time of year, isn't there? Kwanzaa, Hanukkah, and of course Christmas, right?
Yeah, that everybody celebrates the light, the return of the light. The nice thing is that no matter where you are on the planet, we all experience the dark and then the return of the light. It's universal.
Right.
Doesn't matter what religion you are.
One of the things I want you to touch on as we bring in our ancestors today is the fact that they were very much in touch with the spirits of winter, of the solstice. And in your book, you talk about the active spirits coming into the homes and leaving. What was the sense that our ancestors had of these nature spirits?
Well, this is the darkest time of year. So the feeling was that these dark energies that live underground emerge at this time of year because this is the earth is dark, so they feel comfortable. It's the
Right.
most comfortable time for them. So, for example, in the Greek tradition, you have these horrible little cloven foot black elves that can invade the house. And so you have to be very careful. You have to make sure all the windows are shut, the doors are shut, no cracks. There's one problem though, the chimney, and everybody had a chimney, right? So they can always come down the chimney. And this idea of spirits coming down the chimney is fairly universal. It's not just Santa Claus who comes down the chimney. There's a lot of La Befana, who's the Italian Christmas witch. She gets in down the chimney because if everything else is closed, the only other opening is the keyhole. So it's a good idea to make sure you have a key in the keyhole because they can come in through the keyhole or down the chimney. So these elves, they only come around this time at the darkest time of year. You had to take caution. You could burn the herb hyssop in your fireplace, and that repelled them. And if weird things were happening in the house, like things were breaking unaccountably or disappearing, I mean, I've had that happen, something that you always put in the same place, all of a sudden it's gone, like what the
Yeah.
heck? So you know that these elves are around. If it gets really bad, what you do is you take a strip of leather, and it's fascinating to me that this is both in the Greek tradition, it's also in the Scottish tradition. If you have a really bad infestation, you take a strip of leather and you burn that in the fireplace. In
Hmm.
the Greek tradition, it's old shoes. In the Scottish tradition, it's a piece of leather. But you do a lot of protection spells, I guess you would say, at this time. That's why partly why we hang holly on the door, for example. Holly is a warrior plant. And because, if you grab a bunch of holly, it's going to prick you, right? You hang holly on the door, and that will prevent evil spirits from coming in. And there's just a lot like that.
So how do we, I mean, during that period of time, we're communing with these spirits and being, bothered by them. What would the local shaman slash witch slash herbalist do? Would she be available or he be available for consultations on issues regarding specific problems?
Yeah, well, there are a lot of the herbs that are associated with Christmas. In the book, I have lots and lots of herbs, and I talk about the magical properties and the medicinal properties as well. But there a lot of the Christmas specific plants, like I said, holly. There's just a lot of them. Bay laurel is another one. In Rome, they would hang a wreath of laurel on the door, which symbolizes victory. The victors in the Olympic Games were crowned with laurel wreaths,
Right.
and they had poetry. I think they need to bring this back. They also had poetry competitions at the Olympic Games, and they got a laurel wreath. But by hanging a wreath on the laurel, you're saying it's a symbol of victory and strength. So that's going to scare away any potential spirits. And I mean, in the book, I talk about a lot of these things. A lot of the spirits that want to attack the house are not that bright. So there are things you can do. For example, if you put an upside down colander, colanders have holes in them. You put
Mhm.
an upside down colander in front of the door, and the spirits will look at that and try to count the holes. And they'll get so preoccupied with because they can't count beyond two. So they'll go one, two,
Yeah.
one, two, and they'll get lost and then they won't come in the house. Or you can throw things on the roof. That's another tradition, balls of cake or bread or something. You throw that on the roof. I mean, there's a lot of that in the book, how to protect the house.
So I'm calling them nature spirits, but were there specific names and specific problems with these entities? I mean, you're talking about they're jokesters, is what it sounds like. But are there levels to these guys where somebody could get in real trouble if they don't get their act together?
Well, yeah, werewolves are active at this time of year. This is one of the most active times for
Oh
werewolves.
my God.
In in the Eastern European tradition, this is werewolf time. So fire magic is big at Christmas. That's why we have Christmas candles, Christmas bonfires. We put lights on the house, we put lights on the tree. That's all fire magic, which we remember from ancient times, which is also protective. Because remember, these nasty things, they like the dark. And so we make it so it's not dark. But if you want to repel werewolves, you take ashes from the fireplace and you throw them on the entranceway, and that repels werewolves according to Eastern European tradition. But I think that there's something much older going on there. In the old times, it was probably lit embers that you would throw out in the snow because, again, you're putting light out there, and that's going to prevent any of these dark entities from approaching.
We're going to get into the Yule log here in a second, but before we do, are there during the transition period, is there a time to have your altar set up? And are there special practices that we would, divinations and other rituals that we would practice at the beginning of, well, we're right now we're in the solstice, which was the 21st of December. Is there something leading up to the solstice that's very critical?
Well, if you look at Newgrange in Ireland, which is 5,000 years old, if you look at Stonehenge, the solstice, you could say it hasn't finished yet. It's about a 5-day period. So it's not too late to celebrate solstice. You can still do it. Really, the sun appears to stand still for roughly 5 days. So what you would do for a solstice ceremony is you would gather your friends and relatives and you would come into a room and you would make sure there was no light whatsoever, because what we're doing is you're honoring the dark. Because again, this is the darkest time of year. So we're following the cycle of nature, which is dark right now. So you start in the dark, and then you talk about the past year, what happened during the wheel of the year, what happened at solstice, what happened in the spring, what happened in the summer, what happened in the fall, what happened in the winter. You share stories. You might honor the earth, nature, the animals, whatever you feel like giving. You give thanks basically
Mhm.
in the dark. Everybody's in the dark.
Oh my
And
God, in the dark.
yeah, and it's really dark because after about 5 o'clock, it's completely dark. You make sure you turn out, there's no electronics, there's no Christmas tree, nothing, just dark. And you're sitting there in the dark. And then when you're done with all that, one person lights a candle, and then everybody in the room is holding a little candle. And then that first person lights the candle of the person next to them, and then that person lights the candle of the person next to them, and then you go around the room, and gradually the whole room is filled with light.
Okay.
And so it's the return of the sun. And you can even call out to the sun. I'm too old now, but I used to get up before dawn, even if it was snowing in the dark, and go up a hill. There was a bunch of people that I did this with every year, and we would wait for the sun to come up. And when the sun appeared, we would start chanting and singing and playing instruments. And that's another thing you can do just to welcome the sun back. And then we would go share gifts and have breakfast.
On this was on Christmas Eve, Christmas.
Solstice
Oh,
morning.
the 21st.
Yeah,
Solstice morning. Okay.
solstice
So
morning.
in many ways, the solstice happening is much more powerful than this artificial 25th of December, which is supposed to be the day of Christ's birth.
Yeah, the 25th of December was chosen as a date. It has nothing to do with Jesus. He wasn't born on the 25th of December. It's actually the birthday of the god Mithras, who's
Oh,
a god of light.
okay.
And so the church did what they usually did. They co-opted a pagan celebration to make Christmas because everybody was used to celebrating on the 25th of December. So they just took that date. They took the holiday.
One thing is funny though, and I want you to really briefly talk about this, Ellen, which is the Saint Nicholas actually came and in your book, he seems to understand these spirits. So Saint Nick is actually a pagan priest, it seems like, or a shaman of some kind, who is who is, and I could have this wrong, he is banishing the dark forces in a way because we see him in a number of different situations. Talk a little bit about Saint Nicholas.
Well, he was an actual person. He was a bishop, I think. I don't have my notes in front of me, but no, he was an actual person, and he was very generous. He was definitely a church. He was a bishop or an archbishop,
Okay.
and he gave away his possessions, his money to the poor. And he was very famous for that. So he was a real guy. And in fact, archaeologists, you can look this up, had just recently, they have his skull. So they were
Oh
able
my
to
God.
recreate his face. And guess what? He looks like Santa Claus.
Oh my
He
God.
looks just like Santa Claus. Yeah, it's amazing. But no, he was very generous. And for example, there was a very poor family that had daughters, and they were so poor that the daughters would have had to go into prostitution because that would be the only way the family could survive. So he gave money to the family so that the daughters wouldn't have to do that. That was the kind of thing he did.
So the image of him with the Krampuses, which are the kind of a spirit, is kind of a folk tale, and that's not true
Well,
because
Krampus is fairly new, as I understand it. That's a new thing. It's
yeah.
not an ancient pagan thing. But Krampus is very useful at Christmas time for controlling children.
Yeah, we should let our audience know that Krampus is this kind of evil-looking with horns, devil-like figure who spanks children to keep them in in good behavior, I guess. I'm not sure quite what he does, but
Even worse, he will abduct children and put them in a basket that he carries on his back, and he will ski away with them. So, and yeah, and he has a switch, and I mean, I was born in Austria. I lived in Germany as well when I was little. And you can always threaten kids around Christmas time, like, hey, Krampus is going to come, or you're not going to get any presents, whatever. And it works.
they actually had in San Antonio this year, they had a big Krampus festival, first time apparently, and it's kind of taking a root in the United States, different places. It's huge in Germany,
In
and
Austria. Yeah.
yeah, and you can actually have somebody carve out of wood. I don't know how much it costs, probably expensive, a Krampus figure.
Mhm.
It's fascinating, very strange. Let's talk about the Yule log, the creation of the Yule log. When did that start, and what is the purpose of creating the Yule log?
Okay, well, again, this goes back to fire magic. It's part of the fire magic theme. But Yule log is a continuous fire that protects the home in the darkest part of the year. Same thing. Okay. So in medieval times and ancient times, they would have had a whole tree, basically a giant log, and you just keep feeding it into the fireplace continuously during the dark time of year. So in France, the whole family would go out to cut down the log. It was ceremonial. In Norway, it was the father of the home. In England, it was cut in bulk or Candlemas, which is in February, and then put aside to dry for the year. In Serbia, it had to be cut early on Christmas morning, and then it was brought into the house by candlelight in the evening. So, but I mean, everybody's doing the same thing. They're bringing this perpetual fire, and that's going to keep evil spirits from coming down the chimney. Although, how Santa Claus bypasses all this. I don't know, more powerful. But so what you do is, and also if you, I don't understand, if you cut a tree in the morning and then try to burn it in the evening, it's probably going to be pretty green. I don't
That'd
know.
be green, yeah.
I like the English version better. But anyway, so traditionally you would decorate the Yule log as you were dragging it to the house. You might sprinkle grain or wheat on it, and I have a whole chapter on that, on grain. Grain itself is incredibly spiritual, very symbolic. It's the power of the sun and the growth of the warm half of the year, which is contained in the grain. So you put that on the Yule log. You might put bread on the Yule log, a loaf of bread, because that's made from the grain, of course. Herbs like juniper, which is an herb of purification, coins. After you bring the log into the house, everything that was riding on the log on the way into the house, like the bread and the coins and all that, now it has magical power because it's got the power of the season, and you can give away the coins or eat the bread. And
So
then you
this Yule log could be a whole tree that they keep cutting and feeding into the fire. Is that what you're suggesting?
you don't have to cut it, you just keep pushing it in as it burns.
Oh, so it's sticking out into the
Yeah,
front of the fireplace.
right.
Wow.
You could also put alcohol, sprinkle wine or vodka or something like that on it. And coins are solar symbols. So round coins. I mean, gold would be the ideal, but who has gold coins? And there's the chocolate ones, I guess, but that's a symbol of the sun again. And what else? In England, oak would be traditional. In France, cherry. In Scotland, birch.
Oh,
So
different
depending on
kinds
where
of
you
trees.
are,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's burned from Christmas Day until January 5th.
Oh my God. So this is an ongoing
Yeah,
energy.
continuous fire.
It's an energy. Talk about the divination behind that, because in part of your book, you say that you can take the ash from the Yule log and place it at the entrance of the door to keep spirits away.
Yeah, well, the you always keep some of the Yule log, and you can hide it in the eaves of the house, or just keep it somewhere because it's very protective. And of course, if you need to repel werewolves, I would save some of the ash for that.
Jeez. That's the first time you've gotten into some scary stuff like werewolves, Ellen. Getting into a horror show here.
Well, it's the dark time of year. The wild hunt is flying across the sky, and you got witches coming down the chimney and werewolves at the door. I mean, in ancient times, this was a scary time.
Wow.
Imagine your fire goes out, your nearest neighbor is miles away. It wasn't a joke.
So people are imbuing this Yule log with their hopes and wishes and blessings, and it's becoming a healing and a piece of protection, is what
Mhm.
it sounds like,
Yeah,
for these special times of year.
right.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's all about fire magic. So just think of fire, whether it's an electric bulb, a candle, a fire in the fireplace, a Yule log, it's all the same thing. It's fire magic. In ancient times, they didn't have electricity. So any
Right.
kind of fire, even just carrying lit coals around the house. In Scotland, there's a tradition called seining. So when you move into a new house, you have to purify the house and land. So you take lit coals, lit embers, you put them in a shovel, and you walk around the house 3 times with that to purify the house. It's fire magic. That's what that is.
Now, for people who don't have a fireplace, which, I mean, this is modern time, or if somebody in the 17th century lived in an apartment, you talk about the Yule candle, which is the same kind of a thing, but on a smaller scale. Describe that for us.
Yeah, so again, fire magic. It's part of the fire magic. But in England, a Yule candle was lit and burned all day on Christmas.
Okay.
In Scandinavia, it was lit on Christmas Eve and burned all night. So in both cases, you save the stub. And then you can rub that on the plow, and you can also hide it somewhere in the house to protect the house from storms. And again, there's this fire magic just goes on and on and on. In Shetland, a Viking longship is carried through town and then set on fire. In Scotland, there's the burning of the clavey, which is a wooden barrel filled with tar that is set on fire and rolled down the hill. And everybody tries to get an ember from that for luck to put somewhere in the house. And in modern times, what do? We decorate the house with lights, and we put lights on the Christmas tree. It's the same idea.
Our ancestors, would they get the candle from a shaman, a witch, a pagan, somebody who was kind of a nature, connected to nature more than them? And that would be made by somebody with a special technique?
No, I don't think so. Just a regular candle.
Okay. And so
Um,
because it's a certain time of year, that candle's imbued with certain energy, the thoughts, the feelings, the hopes and wishes.
well, it's the fire itself. It's not the candle so much.
It's the
It's the
fire.
fire.
Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, in some traditions, you leave a candle burning outside, and that's supposed to, or in the window. And that's a symbol that tells neighbors that somebody's home and that you can come visit or you can come inside if you need to get warm. There's just a lot around fire, but it's
Um,
all to counteract the dark forces at this time of year. That's what it is.
this is the first time I've heard about the candle, the Yule candle. So I definitely want to do that. I think for those of us who are not able, who don't have a fireplace, a candle is wonderful. And then to burn it all day, that's easy to do. Is there any suggestions for rituals or divination of that candle that we should be thinking about?
Well, be careful. Just be careful.
Where you put the candle, right?
Yeah, I mean, I used to do a candle vigil, I guess, every month. But I had to go to work. And the thought of leaving a candle burning in the house was a little much. So I finally figured out I could leave it in the bathtub
Right.
because even if the cat knocked it over, it wasn't going to catch anything on fire. Make sure the shower curtain is far away from the candle.
Yeah.
But yeah, you could put it in the kitchen sink or you could put it in the bathtub and then you can go to work. That's what I used to do.
Yeah. And again, when it's burnt to the bottom, that remaining candle symbol is a symbol for a good coming year.
Yes, and protection and purification.
Well, that's easy to do.
Yeah. And
Thank you.
so you can carry the stub in your pocket or you can hide it somewhere in the house, you know, whatever you want. It's got that fire energy. It's fire is sacred. In ancient Indo-European tradition, the whole world was made of fire and water. Those were the two basic elements. Everything you looked at was a combination of fire and water, except in Scandinavia, it was fire and ice. But it's the same thing. So if you're working magic, water is very important. You can do water spells, and fire is very important. But this time of year, it's fire.
And obviously, and we're going to get into this shortly, if you have an altar, your candle should be around your other sacred objects, right? Talk a little quick, briefly about the altar and lighting your
Okay, well, to
candle.
keep the house from burning down, it's always a
Right.
good idea. If you're going to do that, if you're going to have a candle burning all day on the altar, it's nice to have a metal cauldron, and you can put one candle in there or three candles in there. The number
Mhm.
three is very important in Indo-European thinking: underworld, middle world, upper world, triple deities, the number three, land, sea, and sky. Three candles is very nice, or just one candle in a cauldron, a
Mhm.
metal cauldron. Just be very cautious when you do that.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. We don't have people burning their homes down. For those of you listening, there you go. There's an ancient tradition that Ellen's presenting to us. Get your candle out, light it Christmas morning when you get up, let it burn all the way through the day, and there you
Or
go.
Christmas Eve if you want.
Yeah. So there you go. You have a sacred item to carry with you. I want to talk about something that I thought was quite fun, which was weather divinations
Mhm.
and predicting upcoming weather.
Okay, so traditionally, farmers, most people were farmers. Farmers would pay a lot of attention to what was happening with the weather around Yule. For example, if you had a green Christmas or a warm winter, that was bad news. And because there was a saying, that if you have a warm Christmas, the graveyards will fill up. And modern science, they didn't know this, but modern science will tell you that you need the cold. Like, I'm really grateful that we got snow last night. We haven't had here in Massachusetts, we haven't had a white Christmas in decades, but we've had very cold weather, not cold enough. You really need 10 degrees or colder. 10 below would be great. What it does is it kills off noxious insects, it kills off pathogens, disease germs. It's good. Cold weather is good. So if you had a warm Christmas, that was bad news. And I remember during COVID, we had a very warm Christmas because
So
I
you're saying
remember
that it helps perpetuate disease processes and viruses and things like that.
exactly.
It's not
And
cold enough to kill them off.
it also means that plants are not going to grow as well. If you have a lot of snow and a very cold Christmas or a very cold winter, plants are going to grow better. And again, it's because the plants get attacked by the insects if the insects aren't killed off. Like the woolly adalgid, for example, that's attacking all the yew trees now. The only way to get rid of it is you need to have several days where it's 10 below. And I can remember, 30 years ago here in Massachusetts, we always had a week or two when it was 10 below because the pipes would freeze. That hasn't happened I haven't seen that in
Mm.
20, 30 years. But that kind of cold is very important. So other kinds of divination, unmarried women would go to the hen house. A lot of my friends, I live in Western Mass, so a lot of my friends have hen houses. You go there on Christmas Eve, you tap on the door, and if a hen responds, that means that the woman will remain a spinster. But if a rooster crows, that means that she will marry. And then New Year's, which is coming up in just a few days, there's a British tradition called the Flower of the Well. And that's the first water drawn from the well on New Year's. When the sun hits, the first person that gets the first water from the well, that brings a lot of luck. And if it's a woman, she will marry within the year. I guess women were more worried about getting married than men were. But that the flower of the well was given to the cows to keep them healthy and to guarantee more milk. You could keep it in a bottle to protect the house. So other things they would look at is berries. If the holly bush had a lot of berries, that meant that the winter coming up was going to be very hard because nature is always smarter than we are and nature always knows. But I don't know, that's not really divination. If you want divination, there's a Polish tradition where hot wax was poured through a key over water. So you have a large key, you pour melted hot wax through the key into the water, and then you see what image appears in the water.
One of the things I wanted you to talk about is that, and you write this in your book, divination for luck and friendship. And people would make specific kinds of cakes and puddings. Talk about that, which I found was just because we did that last year. We talked about baking,
Mhm.
but I didn't know that they could make a pudding that would have those properties.
It could be a pudding like a rice pudding. It could be any kind of a grain dish because, again, grain is very symbolic. It holds the energy of the sun. It could be a cake. Cake is
Talk about
made
what would
from,
be the ingredients, though, Ellen. What would be when you're making a cake for friendship and for
well,
luck?
really, it could be any cake, it could be any pudding. But what you're doing is you're doing divination for the coming year. So you have little symbolic tokens that are hidden in the cake.
Oh,
And it could be nuts, it could be like an almond. Whoever finds the almond has a lot of luck. Or it could be more specific, like a coin for wealth, obviously, a thimble, a little piece of cloth. I mean, it could be anything. You just ahead of time you assign meaning to these symbols, and then whoever gets the thing, whatever it is, that's the divination for their coming year.
so I can see that with baking into the cake, a thimble, a coin of some kind, or some other symbology. But
Mhm.
what are we how are we doing this with a pudding?
Well, when you're making pudding, it starts out liquid and then it solidifies. So while it's in the liquid state, you just stick it in there.
Okay.
And then you dish it out or people serve themselves and whoever gets the symbol, whatever it is, it's their divination.
You're a cook, Ellen, so I'm not a cook. So give us an example of a pudding. Is it because we don't have, they didn't have chocolate like we have now. They made like fruit puddings or rice puddings.
Rice. Yeah, rice is very traditional, rice pudding. There's all kinds of grain puddings, grain and honey
Green honey.
is, but that again, honey is a solar symbol. It's golden. Grain holds the energy of the sun. You can hide a coin in there, you know. And I have recipes in the book.
By the way, thank you for reminding me. Ellen has put in not only recipes, but all types of techniques to build your altar, what should be on the altar. We're going to talk about altars here in a second. And she has recipes almost on every chapter, I think. You have a recipe for
Well,
something.
for every herb, I have a lot of herbs in there, all the herbs associated with Christmas. And for every herb, I give the magical properties, the medicinal properties, and a recipe so that it's called kitchen witchery or hearth druidry. So what you do is you learn the magical properties of a particular herb or spice, and then you can make a dish that incorporates that herb or spice and you can eat it or give it to somebody else. I mean, the recipes are in the book. You don't have to think this way, but if you want to, you can. And then it becomes a spell. It becomes a brew, a magical brew or a potion. That's
So
that's
so the cook is intending for the recipient of this meal or brew, drink, to receive certain enhancements.
Yeah, and what's interesting is a lot of people do this and they don't even realize what they're doing. For example, in the south of the US, there's a tradition of at New Year's you have to have cornbread, you have to have beans, and you have to have greens. Okay, so what's going on there? Cornbread is golden, which symbolizes gold. Beans symbolize coins. And then the greenery, whether it's collards or kale or, something green spinach, that symbolizes money.
Hmm.
And so by serving that at New Year's, what you're doing is you're creating prosperity. You're invoking prosperity for the people that eat it. And, it's that's a spell right there. That's a
Yeah.
spell.
Well, intending things to happen to the recipient of food, that's magic, right?
Yeah, that's magic. And I give a whole bunch of recipes and drink recipes and food recipes and I go through all the different herbs and spices and so you can pick them out and depending on what you need, if you need protection, if you need prosperity, if you need abundance, if you need love, whatever it is you need and you make a dish.
Give us a sample of what a new relationship food or drink would be. What would you make to create something like that?
Well, in the book I talk about the ancient historical meaning also of the foods and spices. For example, chocolate. Chocolate was a sacred drink. It was brought to the earth by the god Quetzalcoatl, who's the feathered serpent, who brought it down on the rays of the morning star. So it came from the sky world, and it was so sacred that only royalty and nobles were allowed to eat it
Hmm.
or drink it. And we go to the Stop and Shop, and buy a bunch of powdered chocolate anytime we want, or go to the 7-Eleven and get a chocolate bar. I mean, in ancient times, you must know this with the Maya and so on, chocolate was very, very special.
Yeah,
So the magical property that chocolate had was it enabled you to strengthen bonds of love between people and also between people and the gods. So the priest class, the that class of people were the ones who were drinking the chocolate. The common people were not allowed to touch it. So Mexican chocolate is really good. I have a recipe in there. So you put a little cinnamon, a little cayenne pepper, you whip it to a froth and drink it. But when share chocolate with somebody, and we still think of chocolate as being romantic,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's because we have this memory, but we don't know why. But yeah, when you share chocolate at Christmas time, make a hot Mexican chocolate, and share it with people, and just remember that this is an ancient, ancient sacred drink, and that it forges bonds of love and communication between people and the gods, also between people and the gods and people and people.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah, I just got back from Mexico a few months ago and we were at a Mayan chocolate factory. It's Mexican, obviously, but it had the same tradition that the Maya had, which was the beans were crushed and used for various pastes and things like that, as well as drinks. So I totally understand what you're talking about. Before we move on from the foods, can you give us an example of a Christmas dinner and all the rituals that would be placed within it? What would be the meal? What would be like other
Oh
than
boy.
vegetables?
I have an entire long chapter on that where I go through I mean, every culture does it differently, right? So depending on that's one nice thing about the book is that, if you have Danish ancestry or if you have Italian
Right, you
ancestry,
go throughout Europe, don't you? Yeah.
yeah, so you can look up what Christmas dinner would look like traditionally. Oh, I just opened the book at random. In Scandinavia, an almond is hidden in a rice pudding served at Christmas. Whoever finds the almond must complete a task such as inventing a rhyme of thanks for the meal. In Ukraine, Poland, and Russia, the Christmas dish is the grain pudding called kutia, from ancient Greek kuki, or boiled grain.
Hmm.
It's made with wheat berries, poppy seeds, honey, nuts, and spices, and I give the recipe. Grain symbolizes eternal life and rebirth. Poppy seeds are for fertility. The honey is for pleasure. The dish is shared with the livestock and poultry, as well as the humans of the family for luck. The
Hmm.
stickier the dish, the better, because the head of the family takes a spoonful and tosses it up. The number of grains of porridge that stick to the ceiling tells how many sheaves of grain will be collected that year. But I mean,
Jeez.
every culture does it, differently. But what I do every year, and I'm an American, but but I was born in Austria. But what I do every year is I make acorn cake. That's my big thing. And people love it. They absolutely love it. But I collect the acorns in the fall. I process them. It takes about 2 weeks. They have to be leached and the water is changed every day. And then I grind up the acorns. I put them in the oven, dry the gruel, the ground up acorns, and then I make them into flour. And I'll
You
be doing
you cut them, you grind them down to powder.
right. When I'm getting ready to make the cake, then I grind it into powder. Before that, it's just a dry gruel that I keep in the refrigerator. But the cake has lots of honey, which is very solar, and good luck. Also, it has lots of eggs, which are again yellow and fertility, right? And I do that every year, and people absolutely love it. They just think it's the best thing ever. I think there's a recipe in here for that.
Acorn cake. Wow. I don't know.
Yeah,
Can you buy acorn flour if you're not one to?
yes, you can actually. I've never bought it myself, but I understand that you can. Apparently, in Korean restaurants and then probably on Amazon, I would think.
Oh, Amazon has everything. You're right.
And you can also find acorn cake recipes online, acorn cake, acorn cookies, acorn pancakes, but I always make acorn cake at Christmas.
Sounds amazing. I expect a slice at some point. I want to talk about the rites for the goddess, describing the goddess and what this is, why this is important. Because we've lost the understanding of God goddess, because the church doesn't recognize that anymore. But talk about the importance of that.
Well, I want to say that I have, I think, 17 books in print right now, but this one, The Sacred Herbs of Yule and Christmas, is the third book in a series. The first one was Sacred Herbs of Samhain, which is Halloween. The second one is Sacred Herbs of Spring, and then Sacred Herbs of Yule and Christmas. In each of those books, I have a ritual for a goddess. Okay. So in the Halloween book, it's a ritual for the Morrigan, who's a triple goddess, Celtic, Irish triple goddess.
Hmm.
In Sacred Herbs of Spring, there's a ritual for the goddess Flora, who's the Roman goddess of flowers. And then in Sacred Herbs of Yule and Christmas, I have a ritual for the Cailleach, who is the goddess of winter. In Scottish tradition, she's the goddess of winter. In Irish tradition, she's the land goddess. So there are Cailleachs from different areas, and they all have different properties. But for me, she's the goddess of winter. I do have Scottish ancestry, but the way you know that she has arrived is when the first snowfall comes. And we've already had our first snowfall, but when that happens, that means she's here. And so I wanted to honor her at Yuletide. And the only creation story that we have from Celtic tradition is about the Cailleach. And the story is, and she's the old woman, or the old veiled one, she's called. And the story is that she was walking through the water on the west coast of Scotland, dropping stones from her apron, which is a polite way of saying dropping stones out of her vagina. And everywhere they fell, an island formed. So she's literally creating the land as she walks. I mean, she's
Wow.
big figure, you know.
So she's a
Uh,
creator. She's a creator god.
exactly. And that's the only creation myth that we have from Celtic tradition.
And so how do we honor her at the first snowfall?
Well, you give thanks. That's all. The most important word is in any culture is thank you. But you can do a whole ritual. You could do it at solstice. You could do it at Yule. You could do it when the first snow falls. So I have first you create the altar, cover the altar with a faded tartan cloth or thick wool because that evokes winter, right? Put objects that speak of the winter season, rocks, crystals, anything that reminds you of frost and snow, evergreen boughs, magical herbs of winter, and so on. And then you welcome in the goddess. And then I say your opening might look something like this. We are here to honor the gods and pay homage to the great goddess of winter, on Cailleach, the veiled one, who haunts the frozen ground and frost-rimmed branches. Her breath is the winter wind, her tears are the sleet, her skin is the snowbound field. Great hag of the gusty white rivers and fields, we honor you and welcome you. All nature pauses under your gaze. Thank you for this time of rest and purification. And then you burn herbs. Now, in Native American tradition, you burn sage, for example, or cedar to purify an area. But in Northern Europe, the traditional herb was juniper.
Oh,
So,
I like that smell. Yeah, dried juniper.
yeah, if you can get juniper, that's the European herb of choice. If you don't want to be breathing smoke, if you have lung issues, you can get the oil, juniper oil, and you could put it with water and spray it around the room instead of the smoke. Then you have some kind of a fire. So if you're outside, it's going to be a bonfire. If you're inside, it's going to be candles, in a cauldron, for example. Okay, I don't know how much you want me to go through this,
I
but
want you to go through it somewhat thoroughly because my next question would be, what do we obtain by acknowledging this winter goddess?
well, just like with the solstice ritual where you start in the dark and then you light candles and you bring back the light, you're honoring nature at this time. It's cold, it's snowy, it's dark. She is the goddess of winter, and she transforms into Bridget or Bride in the spring. So that's the spring face of the goddess. Right now, we're honoring the winter face of the goddess.
So it's
And
life-sustaining patronage.
yeah, the death is just an illusion. Nothing dies. It looks like nature is dead because all these bare branches, but it's not dead, and that's why we have it partly why we have evergreens. That's a whole other story.
Right.
That's why you have evergreens on the altar. But there's a sacredness to this time, just like there's a sacredness in the spring and sacredness in the summer and sacredness in the fall. Each season has its particular sacred aspect. And it's also the old woman. This is something our culture has forgotten. In ancient times, people who were old were valued because they knew how to survive and they had been through many winters and they knew how to heal the sick and they knew how to take care of the animals and how to take care of the people. And so they were valued. So you're also honoring that. You're honoring the gray hairs, the old ones.
Fascinating. As we conclude, Ellen, I want you to talk briefly about the importance of altars. And in our modern society with the internet, with our iPhones, with all this Wi-Fi bombarding us, why is this ancient practice important to have?
Yeah, well, I don't have a smartphone. I refuse to have one. I
Wow,
do have a computer, obviously, but I always tell people turn off the phone, turn it off. But like I said, each season has a sacred aspect. So this season, we're honoring what's happening. What's happening? The dark, crystals, ice, snow, anything that makes you think of that. Evergreens, that goes on the altar. candles for light, for candle magic, for purification. That all goes on the altar. Everything that goes along, holly berries, laurel, as I mentioned, whatever you think of that's seasonal. You could have little images of stags and winter things, okay?
Mm.
That's your altar. And that puts you in harmony with what's going on with nature.
Oh, I hear
Don't,
you. Okay.
don't
So,
forget nature, right? And then in the spring, the altar changes. The color of the candles changes. It might change to something softer like pink or something. You put fresh flowers on the altar, things that remind you of spring, eggs, little images of rabbits or whatever. And the spring goddess Flora, the goddess of flowers, and who's very misunderstood, as the ancients said, and I quote in my book, The Sacred Herbs of Spring, they said Flora is a very powerful goddess because if you don't have flowers, you're not going to have fruit and you're not going to have wine. You're
right.
not going to have any of these things. So you have to give thanks for the flowers. So it's a really big deal. So that's what you focus on in spring. And then in summer is when you actually have the first harvest, which is the harvest of herbs. So you might have herbs, dried herbs, fresh herbs, flowers also. And then in the fall, of course, is when that's the end of the harvest, and we start having the pumpkins, the gourds, the grain, the apples, and it just shifts. But everything that goes on the altar, and you always have candles because candles energize, they bring it to life. But you're always putting yourself in harmony with nature is what you're doing.
So you're tying your physical, mental, and spiritual self to nature by these divination items and also this altar, which is a representation of what you and what you're connecting to.
Yeah, and you're saying that you're a part of it. You know, people I keep hearing about how people feel so lonely and they feel so cut off and isolated. And why? Why do they feel isolated when there's life is happening all around you? There's animals, there's trees, there's plants, there's water, there's fire,
They
there's
forgot that
rocks.
they're part of the earth, is what you're saying.
Right. Yeah. I mean, when I'm in, all I have to do is look out the window, but I live in the country and I'm very grateful for that. But all I have to do is step out the door and I'm at one with all of it, and I never feel lonely. All through COVID, I was by myself here. I never felt lonely, never felt isolated. I
Mm.
went outside every day, made a point of doing that. The time when I feel cut off is when I go into the city and I'm surrounded by people and cement buildings and asphalt, then I feel cut off.
Real briefly, for those who are just coming up to speed with an altar, this can be a small table placed in, would you say, a room that you're active in or a room that you're inactive in?
It could be anywhere. I have one in the bedroom that I look at, when I wake up, when I go to sleep. I have a goddess altar. I have another one in the living room.
Oh my
Um,
God.
I have one outside because you have to put food out for the fairies, don't forget.
Oh, the fairies. Yeah, we didn't even.
Yeah, on all the holy days, make sure you put something out for them because if you don't, they really act up. They start stealing things and messing around. So, and it can also be directly on the ground. And if you look at the Mexican tradition, for example, the ofrendas around Halloween, Dia de Muertos, the ofrendas can be outside, could be on the ground, could be on a table, or it can be several layers, one layer on the ground, the next layer on a table,
For
the
Day of
next.
the Dead, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, they build altars outside, or you can build altars inside, whatever you want.
Okay. But the point you're making in this part of the book on altars is the fact that this is your acknowledgement that you are part of nature, that you're part of Earth, and that you are wishing to connect by these divination and these intentional tools that you're using at your altar.
Yeah, you're putting yourself in harmony. You're not going against life or against the planet or against nature. You're not pitting yourself. It's the Victorians who told us that nature was, what is it, red in tooth and claw, whatever. It's not like that. Even gorillas are sweet creatures. They're, you know, nature, we are part of nature. We need to
Right.
get back to that.
The book's called The Sacred Herbs of Yule and Christmas: Remedies, Recipes, Magic, and Brews for the winter season. My guest today has been Ellen Hopman. And this is a fabulous book. It came out last year, late last year, actually. And it is one that you need to have on your bookshelf. And she has put her heart and soul into this book, I have to tell you. The recipes alone are fabulous. Alan, tell people how they can get a hold of you through your website.
Yeah, if you want to communicate with me, the best way is to go to elleneverthopman.com. That's ELLENEVERTHOPMAN.com. I also have an author page on Amazon. So if you put in Ellen Evert Hopman author, or if you just Google Ellen Hopman or Google Ellen Evert Hopman, all these things should come up. But elleneverthopman.com, you'll see all my books and you'll see talks that I've given, events coming up, and you can ask me a question if you want to.
Do you do video? Are you on YouTube presenting how to cook or how to do divination, anything like that?
Well, I have just been convinced that I need a YouTube channel. I've never had one. So I'm going to be
Yeah.
uploading a lot of my talks, but that's going to be in the new year. I haven't
Yeah,
done it.
I'm on the same. I need to get my video up and running a little more
Right.
thoroughly. Ellen, happy holiday, Merry Christmas, and thank you for your time. This has been fun, and there's so much more we could talk about. Like I said, every chapter is a could be a podcast. So, thank you for your time.
Well, thank you and Merry Christmas
Merry
and Happy
Christmas.
Yule and solstice and everything.
Happy Yule. All right. Thank you, and we'll get you back again. Thanks.